My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm 29 years old and I work an office job in San Francisco doing data entry for a mid-sized insurance company. It's not a glamorous job. I'm not a manager or anything like that. Most of my day is spent reviewing digital claim forms, correcting small errors, organizing records, and making sure everything flows properly between departments. My life runs on structure. I leave my apartment around 8 every morning. I sit behind a screen most of the day. Lunch is usually at the same few places near the office. Then I go home, cook something simple, and try to decompress. Quiet evenings, predictable routines. That's always been enough for me. My boyfriend was Michael Turner. He was 27 and worked as a hairstylist at a busy salon in the Mission District. Michael was the kind of man people noticed the moment he walked into a room. He had energy, constant, magnetic energy. His job meant he talked to people all day, and most of his coworkers liked going out almost every night. Late dinners, bars, parties. Random invitations that turned into entire nights. We had been together a little over 2 years. We didn't officially live together, but he spent most weekends at my apartment. He had a small section of my closet, a toothbrush by my sink, little things that made it feel like he was already part of my space. At first, our differences felt balanced. He brought spontaneity into my life. I brought stability into his. At least that's what I thought. Looking back, the signs had been there for a while. I just didn't recognize them for what they were. The moment everything shifted happened on a Tuesday night. I had just gotten home from work and made dinner. Nothing special, just pasta and a salad. Michael showed up already irritated. He dropped his bag by the door, ran a hand through his hair, and started complaining about his day before he even sat down. Something about a coworker dragging him out for drinks the night before when he was already exhausted. I listened. That part was normal. But halfway through dinner, his tone changed. He started talking about me. Not in a reflective way. Not like he was trying to understand something. More like he was listing a problem he had already decided was real. "You're very predictable, Claire," he said. I looked up at him, waiting for him to explain what he meant. "You're stable, calm, easy to rely on." The words sounded like compliments. But the way he said them didn't feel like praise. It felt like criticism dressed up as something polite. Then he said it. "That's the problem." I didn't interrupt. I just sat there and let him continue. He started explaining how my life felt. Settled. Like everything was already decided. Like there was no room for excitement or change. He said he wasn't ready for that kind of relationship yet. That he still wanted to go out, meet people, experience things. That being with me made him feel like he was skipping a phase of his life. I remember noticing the way he kept pausing, like he was waiting for me to react, to argue, to defend myself. But I didn't. I just kept listening. Then he said the part that stayed with me. "I love you," he said, "but I'm not ready for a boring, settled relationship yet. I want to have fun before committing to someone stable like you." There was no hesitation in his voice, no uncertainty. It sounded rehearsed, like he had been thinking about it for a while. And in that moment, I understood something very clearly. He wasn't just explaining how he felt. He was positioning me, not as his partner, but as something he could come back to later. Like I was a safe option waiting in the background. So I asked one question. "Are you saying you want to break up?" Michael hesitated just for a second. Then he nodded. He said it would be better if we both had space. That it wasn't about me doing anything wrong. That I was a great girlfriend. Too great, he added, with a small, almost apologetic smile. I remember thinking how strange that sounded. Most people spend years looking for a relationship where both people treat each other well. And here he was, leaving one because it was too stable. I didn't argue. I didn't try to convince him he was making a mistake. I just said, if that's how you feel, then breaking up is probably the right decision. That was the first time he looked genuinely surprised. "Wait, you're okay with that?" he asked. I held his gaze. "If someone thinks being with me is holding them back from the life they want," I said, "then they should go live that life." The room went quiet after that. He packed the few things he kept at my apartment into a bag. Before leaving, he hugged me. He said he hoped we could stay friends. I told him that probably wouldn't happen. Then he walked out. And just like that, it was over. At least that's what I thought. The first few weeks after Michael left were quieter than I expected. Not painful in the dramatic way people describe breakups. Just quiet. He had been a constant presence in my routine. Weekends at my apartment. Random messages asking if I was home. Occasional late-night visits when his shift ended early. When that stopped, the silence felt noticeable. At first, I kept catching small reminders of him. The space where his shoes used to sit by the door. The empty section of my closet. Even the random hair ties that used to appear on my kitchen counter somehow disappeared overnight. It was strange how quickly someone could go from being part of your everyday life to completely absent from it. But the adjustment came faster than I expected. I didn't change much about my routine. Work during the week, gym a few evenings, cooking at home. The structure stayed the same. The difference was the absence of uncertainty. When Michael and I were together, a lot of my time revolved around him, waiting to see if he would show up, adjusting plans depending on whether he felt like going out or staying in. There was always a layer of unpredictability I didn't fully acknowledge until it was gone. Without it, everything felt simpler. If I wanted to go somewhere, I just went. No checking, no waiting, no adjusting. I started exploring parts of the city I had ignored before. Small cafes tucked into quiet streets, parks I used to pass without stopping, neighborhoods that were only a short train ride away, but somehow never made it into my routine. There was something unexpectedly satisfying about moving through the city on my own terms. Meanwhile, I heard occasional updates about Michael through mutual friends. Nothing dramatic, just casual mentions in conversation. Apparently, he had fully leaned into the lifestyle he talked about that night, going out almost every evening. Bars, parties, late dinners with coworkers, different groups of people every weekend. Exactly the kind of life he said he wanted. I didn't feel angry hearing about it. If anything, it made sense. He was doing what he believed would make him happy, and I was doing the same. A few of my friends asked if I thought he would come back. The question came up more than once. Maybe because people assume that when someone leaves a stable relationship for something uncertain, it doesn't always work out the way they expect. But I didn't spend much time thinking about that. I doubt it, I told him. Michael had been clear. He didn't want what I offered. And someone like me, with a predictable routine and a quiet apartment, probably wasn't very appealing compared to everything else he had chosen. So I moved forward as if that chapter was completely closed. And for a while, it really felt that way. Weeks turned into months. My life settled into a rhythm that felt natural again. Work became easier to focus on. My evenings felt calm instead of waiting for something to happen. Even my weekends started to feel full. Not in a loud or chaotic way, just steady. And I liked that. Then, one Thursday evening, everything shifted again. I was still at my desk, finishing up a batch of reports before heading home, when my phone lit up. The number wasn't saved in my contacts anymore, but I recognized it immediately. Michael. For a second, I just stared at the screen. It had been about 4 months since the breakup, long enough that seeing his name felt distant, like something from a different version of my life. I opened the message. Hey Claire, I know it's been a while. I was wondering if you might want to catch up sometime. Short, careful, almost cautious. I read it twice before doing anything. There was no immediate reaction. No rush of emotion. Just awareness. Something had changed. Because the version of Michael who walked out of my apartment months ago didn't sound like someone who planned on coming back. I set my phone down for a minute, then picked it up again. Eventually, I typed a response. What do you mean by catch up? His reply came almost immediately. I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I was hoping we could maybe meet for coffee and talk. That was when I leaned back in my chair and really thought about it. Not emotionally. Logically. People don't usually reverse decisions like that without a reason, especially not ones they felt so certain about. So I asked myself the only question that mattered. What had changed? My life was stable. Work was going well. My routine felt calm, predictable, exactly the way I liked it. There was no chaos, no uncertainty, no waiting for someone else to decide whether I was part of their plans. Michael had chosen something completely different, and that was fine. But it also meant that opening that door again would likely bring the same conflict back into my life. So I made a decision. I kept my reply simple, polite, direct. I appreciate you reaching out, but I don't think meeting up would be a good idea. I watched the screen for a few seconds after sending it. No response. Then my phone buzzed again. Why? That single word told me more than anything else he had said so far. He sounded confused, like the invitation alone should have been enough. I stared at the message for a moment. Then I replied honestly. When we broke up, you were very clear about what you wanted. I took that seriously. I assume you're still living that life. Meeting up doesn't really make sense. A few minutes passed before he responded again. This time the message was longer, and the tone was completely different from the man who sat across from me at my kitchen table months ago. It didn't really turn out the way I thought it would. I read that line once, then again. And just like that, everything started to make sense. I stayed at my desk a little longer than I needed to after reading that message. It didn't really turn out the way I thought it would. There was something about the way he phrased it that felt smaller than I expected. Less confident, less certain. Michael had never sounded like that before. A second message came through. I know this probably sounds random. I think I made a mistake. Then a third. I miss what we had. I leaned back in my chair, phone still in my hand. For a moment, I didn't reply. I just read the messages again, letting the meaning settle. 4 months ago, he had sat across from me and explained very clearly that what we had wasn't enough for him. Now he was saying the opposite. Not because something about me had changed, but because something about his experience had. Before I responded, I found myself thinking about everything that had happened in those 4 months. Not just with him, with me. About 6 weeks earlier, my supervisor had pulled me aside after a team meeting. It wasn't anything dramatic, just a quiet conversation in one of the smaller conference rooms. She explained that our department had been dealing with a growing number of issues: messy records, inconsistent data, errors that slowed down entire workflows. Over time, I had ended up fixing a lot of those problems. Spreadsheets no one wanted to touch, tracking systems that didn't quite work, files that needed to be reorganized so other teams could actually use them. Nothing flashy, but consistent. Apparently, management had noticed. They were creating a new role, someone responsible for reviewing incoming claim data and coordinating corrections across departments. More responsibility, a slight pay increase, a clearer structure to my work. Now, instead of just processing information, people came to me when something didn't make sense. It wasn't a huge promotion, but it changed something. My days felt more defined, more intentional. And for the first time in a while, I wasn't just maintaining a system. I was helping shape it. By the time Michael's messages appeared that evening, I had just finished reviewing a batch of reports and was getting ready to leave. My life had moved forward, quietly, but noticeably. And now he was reaching back into it. My phone buzzed again. I've been going out a lot, meeting people, dating. Another message followed. It was fun at first. I thought that's what I needed. Then another. But it's not the same. I didn't interrupt. I let him keep typing. It's all kind of surface level. People don't really connect. It's just the next party, the next night out. I could almost hear the frustration behind the words. Most of the guys I met weren't serious. Some disappeared after a couple weeks. One of them still lived with his parents and couldn't even decide what he wanted. I exhaled slowly. None of this surprised me. It sounded exactly like what usually happens when someone chases excitement without thinking about what comes after it. Another message appeared, and I kept thinking about you. I didn't reply. I realized how different things were with you. Calm, stable, real. There it was. That word again. Stable. The same word he used that night at my apartment. The same thing he called boring. Now it sounded like something he was trying to get back. I miss that, he added. And I miss you. I set my phone down on the desk and looked at the screen for a few seconds. It wasn't difficult to understand what was happening. Michael had spent months chasing the life he thought he wanted. And now that the initial excitement had worn off, he was starting to see what he had walked away from. But understanding that didn't make the decision any easier, because the question wasn't whether he regretted leaving. The question was whether I wanted to reopen something that had already been closed. I picked up my phone again. Read his messages one more time. Then I started typing. I'm glad you took the time to figure out what you wanted. I paused for a second, choosing the next words carefully. I really do hope things work out for you. Another pause. But our relationship ended when you decided stability wasn't something you wanted. I watched the cursor blink at the end of the sentence. I took that seriously, and I moved on. For a moment, I considered stopping there, but I didn't. I'm not interested in restarting something that's already been closed. I read the message once, then sent it. The typing indicator appeared almost immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, a reply came through. That's not fair, Claire. I stared at the screen. Another message followed. People are allowed to realize they made mistakes. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I typed one last message. Realizing a mistake doesn't mean the other person has to undo their life to fix it. This time I didn't wait. I blocked his number. Not out of anger, just clarity. The conversation had reached its natural end. I packed up my things, left the office, and went to the gym like I usually do on Thursdays. Routine, structure, the same steady rhythm my life had settled into. By the time I got home, it was already dark. I cooked something simple, sat down on the couch, and for a while I didn't think about him at all, until I heard the knock on the door. At first I ignored it, probably someone in the wrong hallway. But then it came again, louder this time, more urgent. I stood up slowly and walked toward the door. Something about the timing felt off. I looked through the peephole, and my stomach tightened slightly. Michael was standing in the hallway. He looked different, not physically, but the energy around him felt unsteady, like he had rushed there without thinking it through. I didn't open the door. A second later, he knocked again. Claire, he called out. His voice wasn't calm anymore. It was rushed, almost shaky. I know you blocked me. That's why I came here. I stayed where I was, silent, listening. Then his tone shifted. Completely. I'm sorry, he said quickly. I'm really, really sorry. The words came out fast, like they had been building for a while. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have left. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. I closed my eyes for a brief second, not because I was overwhelmed, but because I already knew where this was going. And I also knew I wasn't going to open that door. I stayed standing behind the door, one hand resting lightly against the wall beside it. On the other side, Michael kept talking. At first, it sounded like panic. Not controlled, not measured. Just spilling out. I've been thinking about you for months, he said. I know I messed up. I know I said things that weren't fair. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. I thought I wanted something else. I thought I needed all that excitement. But it's not what I thought it would be. I didn't move, didn't reach for the handle. I just listened. I miss you, he continued. I miss everything. The way things felt with you. The way everything was steady. There was a pause. Then a softer knock. Not demanding this time. Almost careful. I know you're in there. Of course he did. My lights were on. My shoes were by the door. There was no point pretending I wasn't home. But I still didn't answer. Because I needed him to say everything he came here to say. Without interruption. Without negotiation. I know I hurt you, he went on. I know I acted like what we had didn't matter. But it did. It does. I just didn't see it until... His sentence trailed off. Until what? Until everything else didn't work out? Until the people he chose instead of me didn't stay? Until the life he thought he wanted turned out to be empty? He didn't say it directly. But he didn't need to. It was already there in everything he had told me. Another pause. Then his voice shifted again. Less apologetic. More certain. I know you still care about me, he said. You're just being stubborn right now. That was the moment something in me hardened. Not dramatically. Not emotionally. Just clearly. Because even now, standing outside my door, apologizing, asking for another chance, he still didn't fully understand what had happened. He still thought this was something temporary. Something that could be undone with enough persistence. Like the version of us that existed before was still waiting, just paused. I finally spoke. You need to go home, Michael. There was a long silence on the other side of the door. For a few seconds, I thought he might actually leave. Then I heard him exhale. You don't mean that, he said quietly. I do. My voice stayed even. Steady. No hesitation. Another pause. Then his tone changed again. This time, it wasn't just regret. It was desperation. I've tried everything else, he said. I've been out. I've met people. I've done everything I thought I wanted, and none of it feels right. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the words settle. I kept comparing everything to what we had, he continued. Every time something went wrong, every time someone disappointed me, I thought about you. Of course he did, because what we had was stable, predictable, safe. Everything he said he didn't want. I realized how good it was, he said, how easy it was, how real it was. I leaned my head lightly against the door. There's nothing out there that compares to that, he added. And there it was again. Not what he felt when he had it. What he felt after losing it. I spoke without raising my voice. That's exactly the problem. Silence. You didn't want those things when you had them, I continued. You want them now because everything else didn't work out. On the other side, I heard him shift his weight. That's not fair, he said, but his voice wasn't as strong as before. It is, I replied. You made a decision based on what you thought would make you happier. That decision didn't work out the way you expected. Another pause. That doesn't mean you get to come back and start over like nothing happened. The hallway was quiet for a few seconds. Then he knocked again. Softer this time. Can we at least talk face to face? He asked. Just for a few minutes. I looked at the door handle, at the thin barrier between us, and everything it represented. The past. The version of me who might have opened it without thinking. The version of him who thought leaving was the right choice. No, I said. The word came out calm. Final. We already had the conversation that mattered, I added, months ago, in my kitchen. He didn't respond right away. I could almost feel him standing there, trying to figure out what to say next, trying to find the right words to change something that had already settled. After a while, I heard him sigh, a long, heavy exhale. Then, finally, he spoke again. I thought you were the kind of person who forgives people. The words lingered in the air between us. I didn't answer, because forgiveness wasn't the issue. Understanding wasn't the issue. Even his regret wasn't the issue. The problem was something simpler than that. Trust. And once that's gone, there's nothing left to rebuild on. A few seconds later, I heard his footsteps move away from the door, then the faint sound of the elevator at the end of the hallway. The doors opening, closing. Silence. I stayed where I was for another minute, just to be sure. Then I stepped back. The apartment felt quiet again. But not empty. Not uncertain. Just mine. The hallway stayed quiet after Michael left. I stood by the door for a few seconds longer than necessary, listening for any sign that he might come back. Another knock, another attempt. But nothing came. Just silence. Eventually, I turned away and walked back into the living room. The same space. The same routine. But something about it felt different. Not heavier. Not lighter. Just clearer. I sat down on the couch and let the moment settle. A year ago, if Michael had shown up at my door like that, apologizing, asking for another chance, I probably would have opened it without hesitation. I would have seen it as proof that what we had mattered, that he realized something important, that maybe we could fix it. But now, it didn't feel like that at all. It felt like confirmation of something I already understood. Michael didn't come back because our relationship suddenly became valuable. He came back because everything he chose instead of it didn't work out. That difference mattered more than anything he said, because it changed the meaning of his apology. It wasn't about recognizing my value. It was about comparing outcomes. And I wasn't interested in being someone's better option after the fact. The next morning, I woke up expecting my phone to light up with more messages. Different numbers, attempts to get around the block. But nothing came. No missed calls. No texts. Just quiet. I went through my usual routine. Breakfast, commute, work. By the time I sat down at my desk, it almost felt like the situation had already started to fade. Like it had reached its natural conclusion the moment he walked away from my door. The day moved normally. Emails, reports, a short meeting with my supervisor about a new set of files our team would be handling. Everything stayed structured, predictable, until my phone buzzed during lunch. It wasn't Michael. It was a message from a mutual friend. "Hey, are you and Michael okay?" I stared at the screen for a second before opening the message. Apparently, he had been talking to people, telling them that he tried to fix things, that he reached out, and that I refused to even talk to him. I read that part twice, not because it upset me, but because it was incomplete. Technically, it wasn't entirely false, but it wasn't true either. We had talked, just not in the way he wanted. I typed a reply, kept it simple. We already had the conversation that mattered months ago. He tried to come back. I'm not interested in restarting something that already ended. I sent it. A few seconds later, my friend replied, "Yeah, that makes more sense." Apparently, Michael's version had been vague, missing context, missing the part where he made the decision to leave in the first place. I put my phone down and went back to work. And that was it. No escalation, no confrontation, no dramatic fallout. Michael didn't show up again. He didn't try to contact me from another number. As far as I know, he eventually stopped bringing it up to other people too. Over time, the whole situation just faded, like it had never been meant to continue past that point. Looking back now, the most important part of everything that happened isn't the breakup itself, or even the way he came back. It's the difference in how we saw the relationship. For me, stability was the goal. A calm routine, a reliable partner, a life that felt steady and real. For Michael, stability was something he thought he could leave, and then return to later. Something that would still be there when he decided he was done exploring everything else. That difference isn't small. It changes everything. Because once someone sees you as an option instead of a choice, the foundation of the relationship is already gone. And no amount of regret can rebuild that. I never regretted not opening that door. Not that night. Not the next day. Not even now. Some chapters don't end because something dramatic happens. They end because, at some point, you realize continuing them would mean ignoring something you already understand. And once you see it clearly, there's no reason to go back.